Hi everyone. Welcome to Wake Up Calls on your fabulous April Fool's Friday. My name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach, author of the book A Life to Die For, and also one of the co-authors of the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care. I am here today with my lovely and delightful co-host, Lina Orlando. Welcome, Lina. Thanks for being here. And how are you doing?
Oh my gosh, I am so good. I am so excited. And that's not an April Fool's joke. I absolutely am loving. I'm just loving what's happening. As an awareness coach, I love the expansion of awareness, and people are becoming way more aware of what's going on. So yeah. I'm like in Lina's paradise, truly. Not a fool's paradise, but my own version of paradise, because being awake, aware, conscious, whatever the heck you want to call it, being able to see what needs to be seen and have the ears to hear and the eyes to see beyond the insanity. Oh my gosh, it just does not get any better than that, because I spent 40 plus years of my life completely asleep and unaware of what was happening. I mean, I really was a fool. And so it's exciting to be here with you today and have this conversation. And, if somebody can take a nugget from it, great. If it doesn't resonate with you, that's okay too.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a great way to get us started. By the way, I noticed you have that beautiful painting behind you again. I assume you're back home in Atlanta now?
Yes, I am back home in Atlanta. And our next conversation, I'll be back in Colorado.
Wow. You're just a wing-ding, whip-around, party goer.
Well, I would like to think that it's all party, but it is all fun. It's my daughter, her husband he builds bike trails, and his company, they are on a project in Chattanooga for 2 months. And Chattanooga is only an hour and a half north of where I live. So while he's out of town, my daughter needs help with the baby. So I went and spent 2 weeks with her in Colorado. Then we came here, and we've been here 2 weeks. So she spent a lot of time, it's an easy drive to Chattanooga. Actually, she's on her way back right now. Yeah. And then we'll go back to Colorado for 2 weeks. We'll come back. And when we return, the project will be done. And then her husband can go home with her. And then I will stay here. And then I'll maybe just visit them, once a month. My plan is once a month to see my grandbaby.
That's great.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And the reason I am willing to do that is because through this journey, I have come to realize what ultimately matters to me. And I know that I am an eternal being having a temporary experience. And this temporary experience, I have the children that I have. I adore them. They're totally different and magnificent in their own right. And I just want to enjoy every stage of this incarnation as Lina. And right now I'm in the grandmother stage. It's only been 10 months, but I love it. So I want to get as much time with this baby as I can, because when I was a fool and I was unconscious, I didn't fully embrace motherhood in the way that I would have had I been a conscious parent. But now that I am a conscious grandmother, I now know what being in the presence of a guru is all about. And children, babies are gurus. They are bringers of truth, love, light, innocence, opportunity for newness. And now that I see my grandchild and all children as such wise beings that come here to teach us, I don't want to miss the lessons. I don't want to miss the opportunities to receive all that I'm learning from this precious child. I'm no longer a fool thinking that I'm teaching him. I am now clear. I am in the presence of mastery. And I want to get to be like my grandson. So
yeah. That's a very interesting perspective for sure. And when you talked about when you back when you were in your 40s, you discovered, I think that's when you became aware of the fact that you had been a fool for so long. I mean, I know that people are going to get triggered by the word fool, and that's not our intention here. Our intention here is just to bring some awareness to the fact that most of us, and Lina has highlighted this quite nicely in referring to her grandson, the fact that we arrive here completely open and vulnerable and full of the beautiful wisdom of universal spirit, and it's the conditioning that happens from all the people, mostly our family and our parents and our caregivers, the conditioning that happens that closes down that channel of openness, that channel of love, and it brings us to this state of catching up with our ego. And it's the ego that then takes over for a greater part of our lives. And during that time, that's when I would say that's when we become fools, because we have given up. On some level, we've made this choice voluntarily, but we've also been conditioned because of our parents and all that other stuff that's gone on. But we've given up, excuse me, the sovereignty of our truly magnificent selves in favor of trying to get along with other people on this planet. And that, while it may seem intelligent to the ego mind, it may seem sensible, when you step back and you look at it from a bigger picture, you can see just how foolish that idea is. So in a sense, all of us go through this stage of being brilliant geniuses, dipping down into the pit of foolishness, and then slowly, hopefully, waking up and rising up and learning and regaining the truth of who we are and coming back into our genius. So that's kind of what we're talking about here today. And why did we pick the title, A Fool's Paradise? Well, take a look around the world right now. And you can see all the craziness that's going on. And it's being brought into play by collective ego. And it is a playground for the ego. That's what it is. And that's why we chose this title. And so what we're trying to do today is raise awareness, help us all grow and build our consciousness so that we can kind of detach from that fool's paradise and start seeing things as they really are. So that's my summary of what I think we're here to do.
Oh, I love that. As you were speaking, I decided to just look up the definition of fool. And, because we definitely, as you said, we never share anything with the intention of making ourselves superior to anybody else, making somebody feel foolish, making somebody feel like, oh my gosh, they haven't done enough, or they're not where we are, whatever that is. We don't intend that. You and I have these conversations because we both are in love with the topic of awareness, of truth, of sharing, the desire to share what we have discovered. And we basically just lay out our own lives as examples of how we come to know what we come to know. Right. But there are three entries for this definition in Webster's dictionary. The first one is a person lacking in judgment. So only a fool, the example is only a fool would ride a motorcycle without wearing a helmet. Well, so you're lacking judgment. However, a lot of places you don't have to wear a helmet to ride a motorcycle. And for some people, to wear a helmet would be the foolish thing because it blocks you from receiving the beauty, the movement of your hair or the movement of your head, whatever that might be. So anyways, it's all perspective, absolutely all perspective. And here's the second definition is one who is victimized or made to appear foolish. And the example is history has made fools of many rash prophets. Well, if you understand the truth of who you are, you can never be victimized. So you'll never be a fool to be duped into believing that you can be a victim of anything once you discover the truth of who you really are, because we're all powerful master creators creating our own reality. To me, no longer being foolish is realizing that I'm now consciously creating my reality, and I'm creating a reality of observing my son or my grandson for the truth of who he is, where before I was a fool because I was observing the reality before me, not knowing I was creating it. And what I created was this sense of hierarchy with my children. I knew better than they did, and I totally missed on receiving what was there. And then the third example here is definition. Is a harmlessly deranged person or one lacking in common power of understanding. So, yes, if you're a fool, you're somewhat deranged because you are lacking. You're lacking something. But here's the crazy thing, as you pointed out, my grandson is lacking nothing. None of us is lacking anything. What we have been conditioned to believe is lacking are those temporary things that are part of this human experience, this temporary incarnation. Once you discover the truth of who you are and that you have access to all knowing, that each and every one of us is the bringer of an opportunity for the creative source of all that is to individuate itself and have specific experiences so that we can have this dialogue. And well, how fun would it be for me to be talking to nobody or talking with nobody? One of the important things that I have gotten from my studies of A Course in Miracles is that we are here when we begin the process of waking up and are no longer duped into what we've been taught, and we are living from the truth of who we are, is to cultivate holy relationships where we acknowledge my grandson is a holy being just as much as I am. I'm not better, I'm not lesser. We were both created in the image of the creative source itself. We are all equal, playing different roles.
Exactly.
So this waking up from this deranged idea that we're separate, that we're lesser than, that somebody has power over us, that we're victims, that is what is really, truly allowing people to open their eyes, see what's happening, and realize that we have all been living in a fool's paradise. And so how can we shift this fool's paradise and allow it to be the heaven on earth that it is designed to be, created to be,
right.
The Garden of Eden, or whatever you want to call it.
Now, can you just quickly reread that third definition? I have a thought and I want to share it with you. I just need to have the words spoken again.
All right. A harmlessly deranged person or one lacking in common powers of understanding.
So as you were reading that, I was thinking, I wonder who wrote this dictionary. I will bet my bottom dollar that this dictionary was written by somebody coming from a place of ego, and therefore basing the definition on the egoic perspective of the world. And so anybody who might perceive things differently, for example, let's say someone like Jesus, that person to the ego mind could appear to be deranged or lacking in some of the tools of the conditioned world.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think we all have to be aware of. When you read something, consider the source. Who is actually writing this? And what is his or her or their perspective? This is something that we all have to kind of think about. And so take everything that you read and everything that you hear and see with a huge grain of salt and filter it through your own truth filter. And that goes for stuff that Lina and I are saying too. We don't claim to be, all knowing, all seeing, although in fact we are, because we have direct access to source. And so do you, so do all the people who are watching this. So the truth is, all truth is available to every living creature bar none, all the time.
Mhm.
However, we have to get our ego minds out of the way in order to be able to perceive and experience and really integrate that truth. That's what we're talking about here. And by the way, I like that your whole discussion of how we got to the fool's paradise and how can we shift that into the heaven on earth that we could really create if we really put our pure spiritual creative energy into that. Can you imagine what we could create together if we could just quiet the ego mind enough, the collective ego mind enough? That would be just phenomenal.
Oh, absolutely. You know, that is well, to your first point, question every source is so necessary, because to me, when I'm being foolish, I am not questioning. I am not curious. I am in lockdown, right or wrong, and that's it. And to be able to move to the place where I recognized that I was being fooled by information that just wasn't the truth. It wasn't the ultimate truth, capital T truth.
Right.
I wasn't able to access that inner source of truth that you're talking about to begin to go through a process, because there's multiple steps to this process. First, I began to access truth, and I knew that I was tapping into. Was I tapping into source, or was source finally tapping into me? You know, it wasn't and at the time I thought I'm tapping into source. And over time I realized, no, I was allowing the source that had been tapping into me for all this time to register with me. But I couldn't receive, I couldn't discern what that voice. And it's not like it was a booming voice. It actually was a very still knowingness. And I call it a voice really more to paint a picture. But it was an accessing of intelligence, of knowingness that we all have available to us. And I was really clear that the more that I allowed that guidance to really become my new truth, the more that I was able to remove the blocks that had made me pretty foolish to think that I knew everything, and that I was the authority on everything. And in that process of allowing this knowingness that was bubbling up from me to have I'm going to say, permission to really expand my awareness of what's going on, that took many, many, many years. And, I'm going to say probably a decade at least. And I've been on this journey 19 years. So a good first 10 years of that journey, if not more, I'm sure it was more than that. It was time to really look at all of the ways that I had been duped into believing things that were not true. And we'll definitely get into examples of what that is. But once I was able to discern what is capital T truth and what is little t truth, I was able then to begin to feel very comfortable with living into ultimate truth, the truth with a capital T. And then what began to be revealed, because I had the space in me, I had created a space once I got rid of all that baggage of the little t truth, how to create paradise, heaven on earth, how to manifest that, make it real, was revealed. But I couldn't have the ability to manifest heaven on earth for myself while my mind was so fooled by misinformation. And for a while, that misinformation, letting go of that misinformation, I just had a client that I was coaching today, and she's right at that, what I call the sweet spot, when you become aware of the opposing voices in your own head. And she's now watching it. She's going, oh my gosh, I say I want this, but I am doing that. I said I wanted to create connection, but I just witnessed myself deliberately putting a block in my relationship with, my daughter or my husband, whom she's, attempting to open up dialogue and create a more authentic relationship. But until she sees the voice of her ego in contrast to the desires of her heart, to, as A Course in Miracles calls it, the Holy Spirit, she doesn't realize, none of us realize, that we're always at choice in what to believe, including in our own head. Just because we think a thought doesn't mean it's true. Just because we think something doesn't mean it's the right one. So being able to be in that place of presence requires an incredible amount of courage and willingness to possibly maybe have been wrong your whole life. And if not your whole life, at least in this moment, because then we break down the barriers to curiosity. And once we can get curious, oh my gosh, this journey, you begin to see really how much we have been duped. And it's because we've been reading things, believing what we were told, because the teller of that story happened to be in a position of authority, which is another thing that makes us fools, is when we are told that this person has more authority than we do.
Right.
All of us have access to the ultimate authority. Crazy.
Very, very, very interesting. Well, you covered a lot of really interesting points, but one that just really hit me was how you were talking about whether you were tapping into Source or Source was tapping into you. And I thought, that's beautiful. I love the way you said this. It was neither the case, really. There's always been that beautiful flow going back and forth. Source has always been there. And it's just a question of whether or not you were open enough to receive it. And that is true for all of us. We're all making that choice too, by the way. It's a question. I'm thinking back to my own life about, back when I was in my 30s still, I was still going to church. I was still doing all the right things according to, the way things were supposed to be. And sometimes I noticed that sometimes when I listened to a sermon, sometimes it resonated with me. And sometimes I felt myself resisting it. And so that was precisely my version of the experience you were describing. Am I letting truth in, or am I rejecting it because I have an external belief that's shutting it down? Yeah. Today, I have since moved away from the church. I've moved away from all religions in order to find myself reconnected to Source and Spirit. And now I'm looking at all religions again with a completely different perspective that I wish I'd had back when I was in my 30s, because I might have then been more open to some of the teachings. Religions aren't bad by nature. It's just that religions get co-opted by human beings who want to use that power of the religion to control other people. Yeah. But the ultimate teachings of Jesus, teachings of Buddha, teachings of Babaji, teachings of all these amazing people who have come along, they all emanate from that same source. Yeah. And we all can listen to them and learn from them. And we don't have to be religious zealots to do it. So it's a beautiful, this whole journey has been an amazing, beautiful thing. I'm trying to imagine what my life would have been like had I not gone through some of those difficult, or I won't even say they were difficult. Let me just say I went through some experiences which today, or up till today, I have seen as difficult, but now I realize they were helping to wake me up to the truth of who I am. That's something that everyone, I believe, experiences on some level. And I think we all have to have that experience in order to be able to wake up.
Oh, I completely agree. And it's so when we talk about how do we create paradise, the heaven on earth, and how do we bring ourselves into what the Course in Miracles would call a happy dream. That while we're here believing that there are separate people, how do we all coexist in a really loving, beautiful, joyful way? So for me, it became very clear the way that happens is we have to do the work that you and I have been doing of observing the things that felt difficult to move through. And they were only difficult to move through because our identity, our egoic identity, was tied to the old way as being true. But we are moving to a new earth, creating a new earth, whatever you want to call it. We are literally leaving the old ways behind because humanity is maturing. We're moving out of the dark ages. We thought we had left the dark ages. We've been in the dark ages. We've just been in maybe the edges of the dark ages, and it seemed a little lighter, but it's never going to be lighter while we're operating in darkness. However, we were inching our way out of the darker darkness and into the lighter darkness so that we can begin to illuminate our minds with the truth of what's been going on that kept us encapsulated in that bubble, having to learn lessons that were difficult to break through from. Well, we're moving into a world where that's not going to be necessary. And my grandson is a perfect example of how I know that that's true. And I say that because this little boy is being raised by parents who are way more conscious than I was at that time. Definitely his mother has a level of consciousness that I wish I had. And she is making certain that my grandson Ryder grows up knowing that he is a powerful being. So his lessons are not going to come from the painful dismantling of stories that are not true. His lessons are going to come from a meeting new things with an awareness that he can tap into an inner source to get guidance. My lessons today come really smoothly, and they're so simple today. Took a long time to get there, but they're so simple to glean, because all I'm looking for is, does it resonate with my heart? Does this feel good? If it feels good, I go down that path. If it doesn't feel good, I don't do it. But when I don't do it, I don't have to explain to anybody why I'm not doing it. I don't have to justify it. I don't suffer and have confusion in my mind for weeks on end. Oh, do I do this? Do I do that? There's just a very clear knowing that if it feels good, if it feels peaceful, if there is fun and ease about it, that's the path that I'm supposed to go. So the lessons shift from learning how to move out of conditioning into allowing guidance from source. Because this source of all that is, that's been trying to talk to me all this time, wanted to have a fun and joyful life on paradise, in paradise on this beautiful, beautiful planet. But I was blocking it from showing me the fun and easy way. Therefore, I created a difficult opportunity for myself. And then it's like I dug a hole, and then I had to climb out of the hole. And that's the only reason it's difficult. If I didn't dig a hole and have to climb out of the hole, I never would be in a hole. So there would be no difficulty. I just walk on by.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. How many of us dig our own holes and then wonder how we got there?
Yeah.
That's a good metaphor. And some of us dig more than one hole too.
Yes. And keep talking. Speaking of digging of holes, I'm going to let my little puppy out because I can tell he's getting restless. And I had shut the door, but keep talking because I can hear you. I'm only 2 feet away.
Yeah, right. Okay. Well, I was thinking about what you were saying about the inflow of spiritual wisdom that comes to us continually. It never actually stops. It's always there. And as you said earlier, it's not something that is shouting at you the way the ego mind shouts at you. And I think actually that's part of the reason that the ego mind is the way it is. It's trying to drown out that voice, because the ego mind is threatened constantly with this idea that it's going to disappear, it's going to stop existing or whatever. And that that's part of the reason that we put up such a fight against the truth. And when I say we, what I mean is I'm sometimes I identify with the ego mind, sometimes I identify with my true natural spirit. So when I say I, you kind of have to think about the context, if you know what I mean. And I'm sure you've had that same experience yourself. You know, you might say, "Oh, I hurt my finger." Well, I didn't really. What I did was I hurt the finger on this body, is what I did. And maybe I didn't do it, but this body did something that caused the finger to be hurt. Or maybe the ego might. You see, if we had to go through that rigmarole every time, we'd be struggling just to find a way to communicate. So this is why we sometimes associate and identify with the ego mind in order to be able to express something as succinctly and as briefly as possible. So often we have to just kind of, when I hear you speak and when I hear myself speak, I have to say, oh, is that coming from ego or is that coming from spirit? And I just have to, filter it and treat it accordingly. So when I notice, for example, I think I shared with you my experience of that the guy I ran into in the dog park when I was walking my dog. And I noticed these thoughts coming up in my head about how I wanted to get even with the guy and all this. And I actually had to stop myself. I had to say, wait a minute, that's not who I am. Stop it. I want to forgive because I want to release this energy. I don't want this energy within me. I want the peace, serenity. I want that instead. So silence, no more talk like that. So I think we all eventually will reach a point where we have that awareness of the ego mind chattering away, and we just have to take control. The true essence of who we are has to say, thank you for your perspective. I hear you. I love you. Move on.
Yeah.
We're going to carry on.
Yes. And that's what I was sharing with my client today, is that we are cultivating a new relationship with two aspects of ourselves. We thought there was only one of us here, but there's really two. And actually, I call it a third, but the third is a temporary, it's a bridge. And that third aspect of self is that presence of awareness. The one who's aware of the two voices kind of feels like a third being, but it's only appearing to be a third being until you have transcended the egoic voice. And once you align with just the Holy Spirit's voice, then there's only one of you there. But until such time that we are in that congruency, then we are listening to two voices, and we're having to remind ourselves, no, I don't have to listen to that anymore. No, that thought, that belief created this kind of chaos in my life. It activated this kind of stuff. That's what created the hole. Then I had to go through this to dig myself out of it. So no, I don't need to do that. And that is why, to me, this benevolence from the creative source is so absolutely amazing, because we are constantly receiving what I'm going to call a divine do-over. And it is opportunities to do the same thing again, but instead of being insane and doing the same thing, expecting a different
result. Yeah.
We're using the same experience, doing it differently, and of course, getting a totally different result. Because this benevolent source that wants to connect with us, communicate with us, express itself through us, like a loving mother, only wants what's best for us. It wants to come to this planet and have an experience of freedom in truly paradise. The Garden of Eden is a place that is, it's metaphorical in one way, because religion, uses that story, but it is also the reality of who we are. We're all Adam and Eve. We all enter from the one source. We separate ourselves, appear to separate into, masculine, feminine vessels, or today, into just vessels. We don't even have to label it man, woman. We separate into vessels that allow for the coming together of in connection, in a holy relationship. Well, that source that has an experience of separating itself so it can come together, really truly wants things to happen in a fun and easy way. So we get constant do-overs, opportunities to have a similar situation. Why do you think people go through so many partnerships and so many boyfriends and girlfriends, so many marriages? Because it's a constant do-over. But are you conscious that you're doing it differently, or are you unconscious and are a fool because you keep repeating the same pattern, expecting a different result? Same behavior, but you may look different. Same person shows up in your life, but their names are different. So all those do-overs are part of the invitation into learning, discovering that there is a much easier way. And when everybody is doing it the easier way, we will all be so busy doing fun things, expressing ourselves, enjoying ourselves, sharing from a place of wholeness, from a place of truth, that all of the shenanigans of the ego will disappear. The ego itself, eventually, you transcend the ego. Ego is nothing but thoughts. I mean, that's all that it is. It's thoughts in the mind. Ego is not an organ. It's not, a piece of your body. You don't have to cut off your leg to get rid of the ego. You just stop thinking the thoughts that are not true. And as long as we're in this human experience, there is an experience of separation. So there is an inherent egoic idea there of separation, but it will not be tainted with self-protection. It will be totally and completely experienced with the potential for unification, for coming into co-creation, for what can we build together, because I'm not afraid of you. You're not separate and threatening me. You are another playmate. Oh my God, here's a separate person. Well, what can we do that's fun? And the world that we are headed to is that world. But first, we have to look at the world where all the conditioning that had us fear each other, that had us call experience things like racism, judgment, all of those things that are made up by people who understand psychology and know that ego is only thoughts. And if we can be programmed with thoughts, like you would put a program in a computer, now this software is running our lives and we have no idea that we can literally delete that. We can overwrite that program. We can just, whatever. So the mind has been filled with misinformation, and so much of it that it feels.
And it keeps creating more.
Absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
It just feeds on itself.
Right.
So to undo that, well, it seems really painful because you're literally letting go of your identity.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things here. First of all, I find this whole notion of self-awareness very, very fascinating. As you're speaking, I'm thinking, you talked a little bit about, the two parts of ourselves. And so that requires a certain level of consciousness just to be able to notice those two different aspects of ourselves. And then, as you mentioned, so who's the part that's doing the observation here? What is that? What is that energy? What's that? And then you have a third part. You have the observer. So now I can see I've got an observer and I've got an ego and I've got a spiritual essence. But who's observing all three of those? And so what you see happening is kind of layers, or I don't even want to use the word layer, because layers implies you're peeling things away. But it seems like you're going higher and higher out with more and more levels of consciousness or awareness or observation. It's like I think Neil Donald Walsh described it as the Russian nested dolls, And so what's really, really interesting about that is, obviously the nested dolls all fit into this one container, right? And so we are much the same. We are like a container with all kinds of different awarenesses and capabilities and stuff that we probably don't even know about. But I think that ultimately there is only one true observer, and that is source. That is omnitude. That is all it is. And we're seeing different aspects of it thanks to the beautiful individuation of multiple instances throughout the universe that all seem to be having different experiences. These temporary experiences on an infinite timeline, as you described it earlier. I think that is just totally fascinating. And then the other thing that you were talking about, this idea of, all right, we're heading towards this amazing, beautiful new world. And I think when you use the word world, you're not just talking about a physical space, you're talking about a complete environment, you're talking about the kind of energy that we're going to experience and all that kind of stuff. And I agree with you. And as you say, somehow we have to experience what we have now and raise our level of awareness high enough that we can slowly dismantle and dissolve all of that stuff in order to reveal that beautiful world underneath. The one that we have covered over with all these strange filters and blankets and all kinds of stuff, you know, to create the illusion of what we're living in.
Yeah.
It's a powerful and amazing metaphor to me.
It's yes. And I love the nesting dolls. I've got a set there that I use as examples sometimes to help people visualize what is happening. And when we are in our ego, we are in the tightest of the nesting dolls. We are right there smack dab in the inside. We cannot even see that there's more beyond us because we're so self-absorbed. And that's the way a fool lives their lives, thinking that that's all there is. Let me grab them so that we have that visual in case anybody is here that doesn't fully understand what we're talking about. Is these little dolls that inside there's another little doll. And then inside of that doll, there's another little doll. And inside of that doll, there's yet, you know, a tiny, tiny little doll. Let me take it out. It's so tiny. And you take this one out, and then there's another teeny weeny one. So here, and this one doesn't empty out, but we have this little doll, and little babies are born, and we encapsulate them in an identity. And that identity blocks them from realizing that there's so much more. And then we go into those, you know, middle school years, high school years, and we become even less aware of who we really are. And then we're locked inside this tiny sense of self. And yet there's so much more to us. There's so much more to us. Yeah. One of the exciting things for me about what's happening is that when I began to come out of my tiny shell and I began to explore, who am I? Why am I here? What happens, as I've discovered, is that we're moving. It's like a spiral. Undoing all of these ideas is a spiral. You're moving out. You're moving out in becoming more and more self-aware, conscious, whatever you want to call it. And people become fools when they're stuck inside of this tiny idea that is a definition placed on us for the convenience of those who need to control us, whose awareness is more expanded than we are, understand psychology, understand the power of the mind, but don't understand the power, haven't experienced the power of love themselves, so they take love from other people. This is why powerful people who are completely unconscious don't care the carnage that they leave behind. They really don't care because they don't feel, they're not sensitized to what's going on. But as people are healing themselves, so now you're beyond, as Maslow said, you're no longer in survival and trying to get food. You've moved into a place where you can really study what's going on. You have the ability to understand the mind, maybe participate in workshops, get away from the area that you're in. You see that there's other ways of being, and you pull yourself further out of this homogenized life that we all live inside of, and you just keep going further out. Well, until you go further out from survival, you can't really see how the heck did we get into survival mode to begin with? And that's where you begin to see the powers that be, who we have given authority to while we were encapsulated and thought we were small, and they have power and we didn't. They've got the PhD, we don't. They've got the degree from Yale, we don't. They are born to, the lineage of the family. They're part of the Bush family. I'm not. So once you begin to move out and you can observe what's been happening, you realize, oh my gosh, I really was a fool. I really was foolish. I participated in games that were taught to me that I thought I was doing one thing, but something else was happening. I thought I was voting, but I was actually just picking between the two that have been selected. And there's this strange, cognitive dissonance that is happening where you thought you had more power, but you really didn't. Oh, I thought I was free in America and I could go to the grocery store and pick between 40 boxes of cereal, but what? They're all made of the same GMO poison? But I thought I was choosing, but it's not real food. So the mind is going to go through a process of realizing how fooled we've been. Bamboozled is another word that we could use for the same thing. And we little by little begin to have a moment where we realize there's got to be another way. And that to me was when I began to hear that other voice that's always been there trying to talk to me, that wanted me to widen back even more so that I could move out of all these nesting doll personalities and expand into allowing myself to see the grander picture. Now, most of humanity is not ready for the bigger picture. Most of humanity still thinks that this is, that humans are the most intelligent species and that this is the only planet that's inhabited by anybody. And if there's anything outside, it's, wicked and evil, and it's, they're aliens coming to eat us.
Right.
So there are so many misperceptions that have to be corrected, but it starts in that tiny little self that we think we are. We got to peel the layers and get down to the real authentic one that is stuck inside of this misidentity, misinformation, right. And unravel all of that.
Well, you said a phrase that I think bears a little bit of explanation, and that is cognitive dissonance. Now, this is something that happens to anybody who's going through a wake-up process. You've described this whole thing where you are like the little itty bitty thing inside the nested dolls that has got that first level of identification on it, and that identification came with it a whole bunch of conditions and rules and regulations and authority figures and all kinds of other stuff that created a belief system that little tiny being started to believe. And what happens with cognitive dissonance, as you do your work and you start to maybe peel off a little bit of this stuff and maybe start questioning things, you then get exposed to other, let's call them, I'm not going to call them truths, but other ideas that may be in conflict with your current belief system. Now, if enough people have that other idea that's in conflict with your belief system and it is strong enough, and especially if you love those people and care about them, you may start to think, wait a minute, I have this belief system over here and they have this belief system over here. They don't match. How do I resolve this? Well, and now you have to decide. This is where cognitive dissonance comes into play. You have two opposing belief systems which somehow get into your mind and they start, you start trying to believe both of them simultaneously, and you can't. So you have to resolve somehow. You either choose one and dissolve the other, or maybe you find a way to bring the two energies together and find a middle ground that makes sense to you. But that's really what cognitive dissonance is, and it's an important part of the wake-up process. So when it happens to you, I think that's a perfect time to rejoice, because now you've got that confusion in your mind and say, oh, I am waking up. I can't wait till this process is complete so I can now enjoy my new level of awareness. That's a really amazing idea. I wish I had thought of that earlier. But that's how I see cognitive dissonance. I mean, I'm sure I'm oversimplifying it in some ways. I'm sure a psychologist would come along and say, no, you're completely wrong about that. But I don't care because I'm just trying to explain it in a metaphorical way.
Oh, I think you're spot on. And it actually, it's because we have been bamboozled, fooled into believing that these things.
By the way, I love that word, bamboozled.
Me too. There's something fun about it. But
Is bamboozled, does that grow out of a bamboo tree?
That's so funny. I may have to look up the definition of bambboozled and
That's all right.
how
But anyway, we've been bamboozled.
How different that one is. You know, and you know what's so cool about that word is I love words that sound, well, has the word zoo in it, only it's backwards. Bamboozled.
Yeah, right.
So bamboozled, to deceive by underhanded methods, to be duped, to be hoodwinked, to confuse, to frustrate, or throw off thoroughly or completely. Yeah, I guess that does make sense. It's the same thing as in many ways to be fooled, may have slightly different flavor to it. But when we have been conditioned to believe that somebody else understands us better than we know ourselves, and we enter into this whole crazy notion that we got to go to psychiatrists or psychologists to figure out who we are. I mean, talk about crazy. And we have to go to somebody else to help us figure out who we are because we've been deliberately conditioned to not know who we are. Now, that would be a totally different topic for a whole different conversation. And we can call that one psyched. We've been psyched out of who we are. And then we got to go see a psychiatrist, crazy. That would be a fun topic. But it is absolutely imperative, I think, that as we move through this journey, we let truth become simple, because yes, a psychologist, somebody with a big PhD and who's written 1 million books and is all published, would explain cognitive dissonance in a 47,000 step process, and it isn't. All it is the mind now has to make a choice between two things that appear to be true, and then decide the one that feels, best, most authentic. But in order for us to move through the cognitive dissonance, through the process of these two things that are opposite, we must first resensitize ourselves. We must first come back to remember how to feel our truth, how to feel who we are. And until we get to the place that we know who we are, we cannot feel truth, because it's precisely through not feeling our own inner truth that we get bamboozled and we become a fool. And then we cannot understand how to feel truth or not, that we create this idea of this small self that is encapsulated and so disconnected from our awareness of who we are, that we then need to go to psychiatrists to help us with the cognitive dissonance. But you don't really need, let me say it differently. Go to whoever you feel assists you in whatever way it will assist you. On my journey, like I said, that long process, I went to therapists, I went to life coaches, I went to healers, I went to doctors, I went to all kinds of people. I read all kinds of different books. I read lots of cuckoo things. I read lots of woo-woo things. And somewhere in the middle, I was able to discern that which was the voice speaking to me, helping me to discern what was going on, versus my mind being filled with more information that other people wrote and I was making their way the right way for me until I was able to surrender to the way that was already within me. And that process, it, it becomes simple over time, but in the beginning, it is very confusing because, so for example, with what's going on right now in the world, where you're hearing one story and everybody's agreeing, yes, it's the Russians' fault. And then there's information that says, well, maybe it's not just the Russians' fault. Maybe there's more to this. Could it be the Americans' fault? Oh, no. It can't be this way. It's this way. Well, that's okay to have these two opposing stories happening at once when you think this is the right one. But when this possibility begins to emerge as having legs, as having facts, as having evidence, now all of a sudden, to me, the real cognitive dissonance happens when I thought I was right and it was this way, but the evidence far outweighs what I thought was true. And then evidence of this was a lie comes out. Now I'm like, oh my fucking word. I'm stuck in the middle of these two things. There's evidence that this is true, and there's evidence that this is not. But this is what I thought was true, and this is what I thought was the lie. And now your mind goes into a spiral because it literally is a process of turning everything upside down. Because we're going to realize through the awakening journey, what we thought was true was not, what we thought was up was down, what we thought was right was wrong. And the opposite of that is going to be the accurate way, but it's not going to match what we thought was real. So it's very uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable.
It is. It's very uncomfortable. And it's like I said, it's almost like a birth pain or a hunger pain. It's something like that. You have to go through it in order to get to the other side. And first of all, I really like your example there. That's a good one. And certainly everybody's got to deal with that very situation right now in our current world. One thing that I have been trying to do, I find myself sometimes if I allow myself to get too involved in some of these stories, news stories in particular, especially things that I believe might be true, it's so easy for me to start getting angry. And I feel myself just filling up with that thing. We got to do something about this, So what I'm trying to do these days is I'm trying to say, okay, I really don't know what the truth is. I'm hearing things from all kinds of different sources, and I suspect that the truth is probably something that I don't fully understand. It's so easy to put out any kind of information on our social media channels, which may be 100% true and it may be 100% false, and it's really hard to tell the difference. This is why I don't trust anything unless I can get it corroborated by at least two sources, and that are independent from each other, not one just simply regurgitating what the first one said. That's to me, that's really essential, because otherwise I can get duped even now, in spite of the fact that I have done so much work to try and clear out the cobwebs and get myself to some level of understanding. It's still easy to fall into the trap of saying, oh, that looks true. I think I'll just believe that. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And well, I don't know, it's almost an hour here, and I just want to wrap up in a good way. I feel we've covered a lot of great stuff here on this concept of the Fool's Paradise. Do you have anything that you want to add before we close out?
I don't know that there's anything to add, but definitely to reiterate, take what resonates and leave what doesn't. I am so big on telling my clients and my students, receive what you're able to receive in this moment. there were a lot of things that I heard early on in my journey that I just couldn't assimilate. I couldn't understand how they fit into what I was experiencing. But when I read that book 10 years later, it was like, oh my God, how did I miss this point? Or when I watched that movie, 5 years later, or when I read that poem a year later, take what resonates, because see, this benevolent source, this source of all that is, really truly is gentle with us. We are the ones who sometimes need to have that 2x4 or 4x4 Mack truck to wake us up. But that is the result of the thickness of our own self-created insanity, the layers and layers and layers of things that we have agreed to believe they're not true. So the peeling of the layers needs to happen in a way that feels comfortable, because I don't know of any way to cultivating a relationship with Source than to literally know that you can trust it and surrender to it. But you can't surrender to that which is scaring you. It's just not possible. So please take what resonates and leave what doesn't. If you want to know more about my teachings, go to lineorlando.com, and there you'll be able to find ways to access, more ways of discerning. Just as you, David, put out so much information to help people peel through these layers. So we're talking at the level that we're talking, knowing that everybody is where they are, and be gentle.
That's a great final statement. Be gentle. I was going to say something along the same lines. No matter where you are today in your journey, try hard to love yourself and be gentle with yourself and to accept yourself right where you are right now. You'll get where you need to be when the time is right for you. But just accept where you are now and love that place, and give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to expand and grow at the rate that is right for you. That's really what I think our ultimate message is here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so there is really no fool at all. There's just people going through different stages of awareness and growth. And whatever stage you're at is right now, it's perfect for you.
Perfectly said, brother.
Yeah. So I'm going to sign off now. Thank you all for joining us today. You can find recordings of this on my website at yourlifemasterycoach.com. And Lina will have them on her website as well at linaorlando.com. So all the best to you. Bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.